Ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, and everything in between, above, below, and through dimensions, my name is BlazyBud, your host with an ever-increasing amount of hair. Mifflin is sat right over there, and we are jumping straight in here this morning to the first games of SCC Week 2 over on the NA side of the bracket. Mifflin, if we have a look at the schedule here, we've got some pretty cool games lined up for today.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. In particular, this first set of the day, I think is going to be a real barn burner, a real close match, if you would. It's Average Joes versus Sturdy Artisans, going to be the El Leon squad versus the Sino squad. I mean, just those two names alone should be enough to get people excited.
For sure, and on top of that, we also have Fishies making their reappearance, Winner Dogs, and then finally, to close out the day, the Sharks versus the Hooves. That's Baskin's team going up against a team that had a pretty decent showing last week, and as we can see from the standings, actually are here second on the list, just behind the Artisans.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be a very tight set. This Baskin squad, not quite as untouchable as we once thought, but I think that's the common thread between North America and European SCC. These top-seeded teams, the teams that you really expect to just absolutely blow everyone out of the water, hasn't quite really fanned out that way.
For sure, yeah. Yesterday we even saw the exact same thing happen again to Adapting's team, where they didn't quite look as powerful as maybe they should, and actually ended up losing their game. That was you and me yesterday, Mifflin. In case I had to jog your memory, you know, I know that I'm just, you know, that rememberable. But let's jump into this first set here, Mifflin, shall we?
Let's. I mean, as we already said, it is going to be Average Joes versus Sturdy Artisans. I think that there's a ton of talent on both of these squads. We've already highlighted Sino and El Leon, possibly two of the more tenured players inside of this match. But starting off with Average Joes, just top to bottom, Griff, Dingo Dial, Leon, Ishtao, and Uzi. The only real unknown player, one of the newer guys of the scene, is Ishtao out of the jungle. But with the veteranship and shot calling that Leon brings, the whole squad has really been flourishing.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen Ishtao kind of have hit or miss games, right? We saw it last week as well. Ishtao had, I believe, one game out of the set. He was just absolutely everywhere, killing everyone. And then the other two, he was kind of a little hit or miss. But, I mean, you pointed it out yourself, and that's what we're seeing reflected here on the screen, Mifflin. Elion is just the heart and soul of this team, can do pretty much anything, and is consistently popping off in and around these fights. So I'm super interested to see what he's going to bring on. But up against them, the Sturdy Artisans.
And plenty of name recognition over there as well. Sino out of the jungle, a world champion jungler coming through for the SCC. You've got guys like Pagon and Stewart, who are a little bit newer to the scene, but certainly people you need to keep your eyes on. People that have garnered respect not only from the casters, but also the pros themselves, tearing up the North American ranked scene, and as well as the SCC. I think that this squad very well could be my favorite for the entire year out of North America.
They definitely got that kind of appeal to them. And once again, looking at the sheer amount of clips, once again, we're talking about the mid laner here, Pagon. Pretty much 80% of these replay highlights here going towards the mid lane. So what do you think, Mifflin? This matchup between Pagon and Elion, it's going to be a barn burner, right?
It could be. Leon plays a much more aggressive style, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some 1v1 sort of erupt inside of that mid lane, especially considering Leon's strange god pool. He could lock in the Yanis one game, the Kukulkan the next game. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to me, and if it doesn't make sense to me, it's not going to make sense to the opposition. It's so hard to plan against something as crazy and out of pocket as Leon's picks.
Well, that is the gold standard for how we measure things that make sense. It's how many Mifflins out of Mifflin does it get on the Mifflin knowledge scale. But it's going to be an interesting set of picks and bans, so let's not waste any more time and jump straight into it here, Mifflin. Are we expecting to see just kind of the average across the board, or is there anything in particular that these two teams should be looking to take away?
It's pretty often up against Leon. These SCC teams will generally ban out that Yanis and force him down into his next best pick. But outside of that, both of these squads have been sticking largely to the standard meta bans. Morrigan's, Yamojas, Guan Yu's, things along those lines, just to control that early game and make sure that neither squad's coming away with something off the top of the Reddit tier list.
Well, I mean, straight away, I think we can already point out Joes have done their research here. They don't want that Camazots, which Artisans have really shown some flexibility with between Artisan and Sino. Morrigan, straight off the table, and straight away as well. Nemesis, not typically the first ban. She is definitely up there, but I find it really interesting that Artisans have recognized that Ishtao is very comfortable on this character, and straight away they're saying no to it.
Yeah, don't want to deal with Ishtao's Nemesis, but we do know that he's got plenty of other pocket picks out there. He could go to the Thor like he has in the past. The Ao Kuang has been incredibly dominant as well. With all these top ticks still available, like Set, Apollo, it's actually going to be Sobek locked in for the first slot on the side of Average Joe's. A pretty strong flex pick. You could have it go into the Soul lane out of Uzi's pocket. You could have it just go into that standard support role. It's going to keep the Artisans guessing a little bit, but no need to guess. That top pick Set, that one of the best junglers in the game, yeah, it's still available. Artisans going to take it for themselves.
We've seen Artisans run this in the solo position and the jungle position. Mifflin, I think we've said enough times how much we despise that solo lane set. Just let it be in the jungle where it's supposed to be. Hopefully, Artisans are going to give this over towards the way of Sino instead of Relentless One.
Oh.
E-set looks like it's getting hovered here by the Artisans. This could be another bamboozle because remember, never trust production. This time, it will, in fact, be the Bird Brain locked in for mid.
Yeah, I think ESET is in a very interesting spot right now. Always has been the god of, look, we're not going to do too hot in the late game. It's pretty easy to dive onto me, but throughout early and mid game, the objective control is unrivaled. ESET outconfirms everyone. It makes it harder for anyone to work in towards these Gold Furies or these Pyromancers because it creates a no-play zone for the enemy team. It gives your team additional defense. It heals them at the end, and it's probably going to be the hardest hitting ability in the game, full stop, when it's full charged. So I think that, if anything, the Artisans have already got themselves a draft that should be able to control neutral objectives throughout the early, assuming this set goes into the jungle.
For sure. Name another mage ability that can not only kill an objective at 3000 HP, but then restore your entire team's health so that they can keep going in those fights. You can't. It's only ESET, and Joes are trying to make a counterplay to that here with the Odin. The Cage is pretty good at locking up Isis, as you can, as you said it yourself, Mifflin. She's very easy to lock down in that late game. So this Odin's probably looking to do that. Apollo locked in for the Joes, just getting that top pick ADC racked and ready, and then Wukong will be the counter pickup here, probably for Relentless One, but shenanigans could still occur, so I'm going to reserve my judgment on that. Ban-wise, though, Mage, Hunter. Other way around.
Yep. Bans across the board, pretty standard here, just dealing with what they don't have on the other side. No Hunter for the Artisans yet, might as well get rid of those top picks over there. And the Mages, as you already highlighted, going to target out Joe's mid laner. But I gotta imagine the average Joes, Leon and Uzi, have so much experience at the SCC level, or the SCL level, rather, that console league that used to exist, that really, ESET was much more popular there, and it's always been that tried and true counter pick inside of Odin. Not only does it lock her down, make it so hard for her to escape, maybe force out a phantom pickup from the Artisans, but it's also going to deal with that healing, kind of detracting a little bit from that team fight presence that ESET's able to bring. I really like this draft from the Joes now, especially considering there's a wheelish pickup. Talk about another tried and true combo. Sobek Tail Whip or Pluck that sets up for Gravity Surge so incredibly well, and you're going to be able to deal with Onher's Leap too. I think the Joes come away with a very smart draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chunga getting locked in here for the mid lane. Another healer with a little bit more consistency on that heal rather than just relying on that ultimate. She's a very scary pickup very often in that first set of bans, but not this time. She's going to be able to be allowed to go through. Finally, Artisans are going to pick up the Ares as the last pick. This is a question mark for me. I think this is going to be a very make or break pickup for the Artisans.
but it's strong into a wheelish. You won't be able to use the feather step. You can't use the leap from Suku either. It's a 15-second cripple. I mean, Sobek's not going to be plucking you. Jumps can't come through from Odin. So many of the average Joe's picks rely on not being crippled. Aerie is a phenomenal pick to deal with that, but it is that double-edged sword. If he's blown out in the early game, if he really falls behind, Ares really does lack in comeback mechanics, as does ESET, as does On Her. They really need to get off to the right start, but the Artisans are going to have a very clear and distinct advantage inside of the early game.
For sure. There is another question mark that we have to talk about here, Mifflin, and that is, are these picks as black and white as they seem? Artisans, in particular, are very well known for, especially Elion's, ability to just change what he wants to play. Now, I'm not really sure Uzi's going to be too comfortable on the E-set, but I'm not ruling out the possibility that this Ares and Wukong could swap places.
Yeah, I think if the Artisans want to, they could have Sino take this Wukong into the jungle. He has done that in the past. But look, man, I like set jungle. I like the pressure that it brings. I like the ability to gank lanes, the mobility, leaping over walls, so valuable if you're trying to go for these mid lane ganks. I think that, if anything, it should go the way we expect it, but you're absolutely right to highlight that it could be a little bit of a swap up. That Sun Wukong jungle does bring a ton of pressure if it does go that way. You can max the Master's Will or something along those lines, but it's hard to say, man. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it really is. We'll have to see. We got a little bit longer to wait, but I think I did just hear that Elion was playing on the Wukong, question mark? Guardian, sorry. So it will be the Sobek going over towards Elion, the other side of the game. That's,
It is interesting. I maybe think Dingo Dial could flex himself into mid here, or maybe potentially the Sobek could go mid. It's not a ton of information to go off of. It's hard to know absolutely where it's happening, but look, Uzi's going to be piloting the Odin. We know that for a fact. We know Griff is going to be on the Apollo. Those are easy to lock down. Where is this a wheelish going? Likely the jungle, right? Outside of that, it really is those slight question marks and where these individual picks are going to land.
Well, it'll be interesting to find out. But Mifflin, I'll propose this question to you whilst we're well, never mind. I don't have any more questions for you, Mifflin. Ignore me. We're gonna go straight into the game here, and I'm sure the casters will have the questions for themselves.
Thank you, Blazy and Mifflin. It's Finch and Gore here as we move into Game 1 between Average Joes and Sturdy Artisans. And what a Game 1 it is shaping up to be between these two very competitive teams here in the SCC North America edition. Gore, lots of stuff to take a look at here. Obviously, Leon is on this Sobek. That's something clearly worth watching, with Ishtao on the Wheelish instead. And it certainly looks like he plans to take this Sobek into the support role proper by him lining up over at that purple buff start. We know that this Leon can do, right? He can play support, but I miss his impact in the jungle or in mid where he can be a carry. I don't know. Can he really hard carry this game from the support role?
I think you can hard carry, so it's a different kind of hard carry, though. That's the thing that gets really awkward, right? You have to play a different game in the support role to be the quote-unquote carry. I think Leon is more than capable of it. Like, this is a guy that, if you put him in any role in the SCC, he's gonna do well, right? It's just the question of, is everyone around him going to play up to that level, right? And that's what I think I want to see here. I know as the Sobek, though, I expect a lot out of him.
I expect so too, and already Ionic is the one taking a ton of damage. Leon looking comfortable already as First Blood is within his grasp. Catches up to Ionic, taking some sideways pathing instead of going straight ahead, but it does work out for him. Ionic makes it out, but that's not the only interesting thing to take a look at here. Sino has the speed buff. I think it's right that he's going into the jungle, but Stewart still looking for action onto Leon, gets the beat down. Now Pagon in danger of falling. Griff gets First Blood. Ishtao right behind, puts down Pagon, but maybe Sino on the East set can find a bit of a chance for a return kill, but nothing is there. Average Joes get off to an excellent start.
Yeah, there's so many things to talk about in this game, right? It's just so difficult to figure out which one I want to get my hands on first. I guess ESET being in the game in general is one to tackle, but also being in the jungle is another thing. Like, it's Sino, so you can expect something like that to work out. But at the same time, you're really lacking some of the engage that you're going to have off of, say, like a leap. Like, normal junglers have something to close that gap. If you are playing ESET here, you have to hit that Spirit Ball, right? I mean, it's almost max range, and let me tell you, a max range Spirit Ball will chunk somebody, and it is great peel for you as well. But I feel like Sino's going to suffer early on for some of those gank potentials.
Big damage there from Baron Area and Ishtown, nearly getting the kill on the Sino, but Gore, you're exactly right about the peel. We just saw it come out with that Spirit Ball and narrowly keep them alive, but what an interesting start with this ESET in the jungle, with Pagon playing this set mid strategy from them, which is something we've seen. Set move around to ADC, to mid, he can certainly make that work. It's just a question of, yes, Sino can maybe make ESET work in the jungle, her clear's not bad, but were you expecting for Ishtown and Baronary to get some early kills, for Griff to get one too, right? I mean, that's not the start to this game I think they were expecting with this strategy. So we'll see if Sino can now make this recover from, a bit of a slow start where things didn't go quite the way they wanted.
Especially because it's a big shift in dynamics. Sturdy Artisans last week, Pagon did something I loved where he played game 1, had a phenomenal Yanis in that game, and then in game 2, when the Yanis was picked away from him, it went over to the side of Baskin that time. He picked the Morgan so that he could continue playing Yanis. He only transitioned into Yanis for the entire duration of the game. And first off, it made me laugh insanely hard because that's just such a power move to make to somebody, to just flex on them to say, no, I'm still going to do this. But I also like the fact that you're having that shift. I want to call it, again, just because he's the one who I think of when I see this set mid, Paul, in the Pro League, who is one who is just as flexible, kind of bringing out these picks, as someone that you maybe would consider the power pick. Most people, if you say Paul, they're going to think of the Scylla right now because of what he did at Worlds. But this set was something that he really helped kind of pioneer. I remember talking to the Knights and asking why, though, and they just said, look, if Paul says he wants to play something, you let him have it. But it showcased that this set can do a ton in mid, but we've never really gotten to see it paired, well, mainly with an ESET. With a mage, maybe, but it didn't happen that often, right? Typically, it was a 4 physical stack. So that puts some pressure on the Sino to have an interesting performance, but also for Pagon, I mean, especially with an early death, you have to turn this game around. Your performance last week was really stellar. Average Joe's kind of on the opposite mark of that. They didn't have a really good first week, ended up losing to a team that I maybe underestimated there in Fishies. So the changes everyone's making are appropriate, but can this set live up to what it needs to?
Whoa, Leon just off the mark with that pluck. I liked how he used Tail Whip underneath the tower. I thought to initially set up the pluck, but it just was not there. I'm with you, man. I think that we're seeing some different strats from both these teams, moving Leon around and being, flexible about where he can play and what he can do for this team, and having him play support for him. Over on Sturdy Artisans, swapping around these mid-jungle picks between Sino and Pagon and trying to get a bit of an advantage, catching Average Joe's off guard. And so far, despite those early spills, I mean, Sino not falling all that far behind, a little bit behind in terms of the net worth, but really not even by 100 gold, right? So he's hanging in there. He's making it work so far. I'm interested in when we start seeing some ganks on if this ESET can rotate as well as something like the Wheelish who can hop on Suku, as it's a purple buff invade attempt from Average Joe's, and the attempt successful, stripping that away from Stuart with a rotation from Leon.
I'm going to be honest, I won't be surprised if we don't see Sino do a whole lot in these lanes. Like, maybe hang out with Set and mid with Pagon, but I honestly, looking at this team, I kind of want to see Pagon take on the role of rotator and let, Sino come in and take the farm away in mid while Pagon happens to be gone. Because this is a pick at all times of Smite that I've ever watched. You do not pick ESET because she is really good at one-on-ones. She can be solid. Like, a good Spirit Ball Windgust combo can absolutely hurt somebody. But you pick her because how solid Circle of Protection is going to be around objectives, right? Like, this is a team fight god. I think Sino, this is almost maybe a plan to come in and be 1,000 gold, maybe even 2,000 gold if they lose a little bit harder in the early game behind, and then start flexing in them when they get to this stage, when they start grouping up, because their team fight and being able to stand together is gonna be really strong. I mean, Ares plus ESET plus a set in there to get a lot of damage down, that's so much setup and combo potential to really cause some trouble for the Average Joes. I want to see what they do when they transition to that, and specifically Sino's Circle of Protections, if they're used for healing, if they're used for objective confirm, a little bit of both. I mean, honestly, throughout the game, you kind of want both, but really where he throws those ults down, I think, is going to dictate the pace of the jungle here, and really where they're putting their pressure, whether it's on the jungler or onto their mid and carry.
Yeah, I'm interested And exactly where they're looking for that pressure. We saw, as you kind of mentioned, that Sturdy Artisans don't have a problem with grouping up as Leon misses another pluck, but the tail whip combo forces the beads out from Pagon. He'll be that much more vulnerable, but it's Leon who's in trouble, goes lurking in the waters. That allows him to escape. Even gets too aggressive and just gives Ionic a free pull, but the Waxing Moon response is even better. Somehow Leon's still alive, but Pagon comes in, cleans up, and trades his life for a support. Not worth it at all, my man, but maybe Ionic and Sino could put down Ishtal. That adds on to the value as a nice little kill coming through, but in comes Griff. They're throwing down in the middle lane, and Stewart walks here in the same speed. Does find the Impale beads are used to get him some breathing room, but absolutely bloodbath here in the middle lane as Baronelli can't quite get this last couple of kills.
So Chang'e has this really, really unique amnesia about her for me. Which is to say, last year, we see her getting picked up in mid, occasionally in Europe, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, cool, whatever, like, it's just their style. This year, last week, I remember thinking, why is she getting banned out already? And then it shows up, and this happens every time I play her as well. I forget how much damage she does. Baroneri just chunked people throughout that entire fight. There's so many moments where Sturdy Artisans should have been able to just run away with that, but Baroneri kind of single-handedly said no. And there was a lot of intermixed play with his teammates, but so much of the peel and turnaround was, I'm going to ult and they can't do anything. I'm going to hit them with my moon or my crescent moon, and they're just not going to be able to do anything afterward because I took half of whatever was remaining on their health bar. And that is something I think that's unique here. Baroneri is a good mid laner, but it's even more impressive seeing the damage he has.
Ozzy dropping the cage, gets him away from the Sino chase, but Pagon is here too, and this is what Sturdy Artisans are going to have to do a lot of, Gore, in my mind. They're going to have to out-rotate Average Joes and just get there sooner, I think, to make up for what is a bit unorthodox in their composition. But if you're Average Joes, they came away with a small win in that mid-skirmish. There's 3 sets of beads that are down for the Sturdy Artisans, Sino, Pagon, and Stewart. Very vulnerable without that additional protection in the CC immunity. Meanwhile, it's just the blinks trade out for Average Joes on Ishtal and Leon, and they'll have those blinks up in time to still punish the Artisans. I want to see if they're on those timers, looking for yet another way to come out ahead in that mid-fight.
I mean, you can see Ishtal's on the prowl right now, trying to just figure it out. Yeah. I mean, was looking over there in mid, now looking over there in left. But this might not be the right fight. They're going in, depending on the way that Leon sets this up, Ionic's going to be able to come through. I don't know if you used the ult there, but he did.
Yeah, I'm with you, Gore. I don't know if that's super necessary, but just go ahead and take the kill. I like it. Get it done quickly, and that sets up for maybe even getting some invades. Even Griff was on the way, too. Average Joes were absolutely looking to capitalize off those down purification beads, and Griff giving Pagon the hands in the middle lane. That's Griffin Solays. Put some respect on the name.
And look, you've got to look at this. Griff is doing something right. He's 3-0. He's 3 levels up on Pagon. Like, that rotation is nothing more than a huge flex that he knows he can kill you. Any other game, a normal Apollo with regular farm at this point, is not going to be able to make that rotation. It's not going to make it look as good. Can't just solo somebody out like that. Also, does have to spend a little more time on the Greater Scorpion. There you go, Griff, as he picks it up. Just to show he's not infallible. He can leech a Scorpion before it's done, but at this point, it's getting out of hand. The rotations, he's on point with this. This is the reason that the Apollo ult is deemed as one of his best things. Again, a couple years ago, you have people saying that it's useless, but now you get to really see in full effect those rotations are what matters the most. And in the same way, you're looking at the, I would argue, maybe non-rotations, right? Sino having no impact right now. You can see that Average Joes are kind of abusing the fact that they have the speed just on their side. They have better movement across the map for pretty much everybody. Ishtal, Griff are able to rotate almost instantly. Leon and Baroneri. Baroneri, you don't think about it, but the Chang'e dance is allowing you to rotate. It's just really nice movement.
Leon is the early target here. He was hit by the chains mid-pluck. Won't have to give up the ult or his life, though, so I'm sure he's happy with that. We didn't talk about it yet, but Average Joe's, not sure actually, Gore, I'm sure you hit on it, but they have a ton of innate anti-heal in the kits, right? They have the heal from Baroneri, obviously, with it. The Sickening Strike from Leon has some of that, too. And then the Odin Cage. That's going to give them some great opportunities into the set, into the East set. And Baroneri just pulling the trigger in mid, drops the Waxing Moon. And that is Pagon with those speeds down. I think that innate anti-heal is important when you consider the state of this game. Study Artisans aren't just going to be able to fall back on Circle of Protection and all that sustain that sets normally have. They're going to be missing a lot of that. It's 50% on Sickening Strike and on the Baronary heal as well, as Ionic is plucked right back into that ultimate coming through from a Wheelish. He does manage to get that no escape off, though, but he doesn't pull anyone, and somehow Ionic still drawing breath. Ishtal will fall, but in comes the engage from Sturdy Artisans.
And this is where Uzi's got to be a big role in rotating for these fights. If he's able to get here a little bit sooner, something changes. But there's still 5 people strong. They're looking to barrel down, but Griff just dives in!
Yeah, this does not seem well advised, but somehow Griff is still alive. The cage traps 2 within it, and Uzi going to re-engage. Does bring Relentless one down low, but I don't see much chance for Average Joe to find more, but Leon goes for the pluck. That gets the beads out from Stewart. No further engage on the back, though, as Sino drops down. That silence gives his team a little bit of shielding, but no more action comes from it. Gore, that's a huge fight for the Artisans there in mid.
Yeah, I mean, being able to stabilize, I think, and find some kills off of that is massive for them. Getting Ishtal, getting Baronary, maybe even more important. Get rid of one of the healers, or the only healer here, and one of the biggest forms of anti-heal, like you said. That's 90% since he has that Divine Ruin. So you're virtually getting an Odin ult every time you see a 3 come out of Baronary. If you see him spin around, anytime he's healing, anybody he hits on Sturdy Artisans, they're now getting 90% reduction. Hurt Ionic there would have gotten a much more massive heal out of that Circle of Protection otherwise, and that's why things I think are going to get a little more stressful overall for these Sturdy Artisans, because Sino, where you place your ult is going to be important. If Uzi just decides to drop the Odin Cage on top of that, good luck, right? Like, you're not going to be able to get anything out of there. Same thing, Baronary comes up and just happens to hit you and keep that Divine Ruin applied while you're in there. Good luck, you're just not going to be able to get away from this, so the healing is not going to be where you have to play. You have to play instead with that burst damage that comes out of there. And unfortunately there, it was used as kind of a quick heal. Did get a little bit of a pop, but they weren't able to chase down as many kills as they wanted. I think there's a lot of play potential, again, that team fight showcase there from Sturdy Artisans. But like you had highlighted, that anti-heal is really going to become a nuisance, and they managed to draft it in a way that they don't have to sacrifice a starter. Like, they don't have to go towards Tainted Steel because they can still get this Bluestone on Odin because they have so much anti-heal elsewhere that they're not sweating about it.
Well, that's a great point. It adds to some flexibility here for the Average Joes, doesn't it? And speaking to that point, they're somehow able to get to the Gold Fury first, even though they just lost that fight in mid pretty handily, right? They lost Ishtal and Leon up top on that left side of the mid lane in the jungle, really without getting much in return at all. Yet they just group right up, walk on into the Gold Fury and take it. They're up nearly 3,000 gold at this point in the game, which is right where this team wants to be. They've got an Odin in the late game, right? They maybe not quite as great as some other Soul Laners when they get there, but certainly still strong as Sino sees Griff, and that is a high-value target. He didn't have the beads for another 13 seconds, so there just wasn't much he could do.
Yeah, it's going to take, I think, a faster reactions than that, and honestly, there's not much you can do. Like, maybe you pop Aegis, but you're gonna die there, right? I think it's actually smarter. You know you're gonna go down. You already have a decent level lead. It's okay to take one death over there. It's honestly good here for Sino because it gets him back in the game. But at the same time, for Griff, you manage to maintain everything that you need for the next team fight. Have your ult, have your beads, have your Aegis. Technically, you get a nice back. You get to go buy some items. Unfortunately, you lose your tower, but I think it might pay off.
Yeah, Pagon able to take care of Ishtal there with this aggression, with a big rotation over to left. And that will help things out. Or rather, got that kill back over towards mid. That's where Pagon currently resides and is able to make that work. And the pressure in left, as you said, gets the tier 1. So not bad from Sturdy Artisans to respond to that pressure on the Gold Fury, and to Average Joe still managing to get a bit of a lead, even with losing that most recent team fight. So if I'm Sturdy Artisans, these last couple of groupings have favored me. I want to keep that up, right? I want to keep looking for these 3-on-2s where my team is roaming around the map and can find these picks before Average Joes can respond and kind of keep up that pressure.
And doing a good job dealing with Ishtal. I feel like Ishtal was a kind of early problem for them. And honestly, I think in the jungle phase and any teamfight phase, the rotations that Ishtal's going to be able to have, jumping up on Suku and just running around the jungle, it's going to close the gap pretty quickly. Ishtal's going to be available for pretty much any fight, whether he's on that side of the map already or not. And so being able to deal with that, get that damage off board, because, again, Chang'e and a Wheelish both do a lot more damage than you tend to expect in matter of an instant. And now that hi-rez has been finished, I expect a lot from Ishtal in terms of the damage output department, That's enough to one-shot and destroy Sino and Pagon. 100-0 them is the better way to describe it. So if they can deal with him at range and use that against Spirit Ball for a nice long-range stun, Pagon comes in and burns, that's the kind of combination they're going to need. Especially with the Stone of Binding, it's going to make it a lot easier with Sino initiating these fights to try and find it. You hit that CC from your Spirit Ball, or I guess it might even work on the debuff coming down from your... your... Silence. There it is. The word came forward with me that comes into it. But getting rid of their protections for 10 seconds, or by 10, 4, 5 seconds, makes it easier to just burn down their health.
Relentless one low, but Rionic responds by moving in with the no escape, and Ishtao indeed cannot escape. He's sent to the grave quickly. Waxing Moon only connects with one, and that's Pagon, who's able to retreat. But Ozzy comes in, drops the cage, and does trap two in his carnival of horrors. That is Pagon removed to make it 1-for-1 jungle for mid, but the action continues. Ozzy alone on the left side, isolated by Ionic and the boys, but Ozzy retreats back to friendly territory. Gets away from Sturdy Artisan score. These fights are action-packed, and they're all in commitments, but still somehow only one member from each team falls, and Sturdy Artisans want to keep up the aggression.
That's going to showcase, again, a difficulty that's here. In-combat healing is still helpful, and Chang'e isn't necessarily known as the one that's going to burst your health bar up from half to full. It's going to have to be a steady influx from Baronary, but it is still a problem here. There's already a Brawlers picked up there in mid for Pagon, but I feel like there's not as much focus on the anti-heal on the other side. And again, Chang'e maybe doesn't need it. If you kill Baronary fast enough, technically the healing stops anyway, but it is enough in these groupings when 4 or 3 of them are around that your team's having to take a back or having to be a little more cautious, and they're able to get back up close to full, even with some of that nerfed healing that comes through when they're finally out of combat. I add that in with the fact that Baronary has, again, a good amount of damage on the Crescent Moon, but mainly, I think, a lot coming out from that Waxing Moon, that ultimate, those stun potentials. With the grouping that we've seen so far from Sturdy Artisans, I expect to see a lot of 3-man, 4-man ults, and the longer you're stunned, again, it stacks. The more people you hit, the further that last guy is going to be stunned out. That's just unfortunate in a team fight. If you hit someone, if it's Sino, if it's Pagon, if it's, I'm forgetting the name, but if it's the Honor as well, that's just 3 people all of a sudden, or 1 person in the middle of a fight that's just not going to get to play.
Yeah, it's someone that gets taken out of the fight easily. Gore, I'm thinking that these builds, though, on the other side here from Average Joe's are going to be important. They are not respecting the magical damage that's coming out from Sturdy Artisans at all. Look at the way that the support and solo laner are building. It's the Sovereignty, it's the Breastplate of Valor, only physical damage protection, and then Relic Daggers, so they have like some HP and get those relics off sooner. But while all that was happening, the Artisans seem to have laid perfect control to this Primal Fury. Circle of Protection cannot be out-confirmed in most cases, and that will be exactly how it results. There's also just a lot of blinks and beads, but there is that upgraded Cursed Ankh from Leon. That's going to help with some of this healing too, as Relentless One is his target. As he drops the cage, but Relentless One just goes up to the cloud and leaves. That's nice and easy for him, so maybe not the highest value cage you'll ever see.
It gets 2 ults, technically. Ishtao, I don't know when he activated that, but unfortunately not able to get anything out of it. So they drop 2 on the side of Average Joe's, and they lose that Gold Fury. And yeah, technically Sturdy Artisans dropped a little bit more just to confirm it, but they're in a good spot. You still lose a Tier 1 tower, but I feel like that's flexible, especially when you look at Pagon over here, who's split pushing very happily at this point. This is where Griff's ult comes in. This is a little scary with the level difference.
Can't quite make it, though. The bat goes off in time, and Stewart unable to land. And I think part of the reason why they're not respecting this magic damage is like, because you said, right? Like, Sino's not building entirely damage. It's an E-staff from him. It's a Stone of Binding. He's going a bit more of this bruisery path, and I think Average Joes have the correct read that they don't need to pay a whole lot of respect to this magical damage. No dedicated magic defense items opened this build up a little bit more for these frontliners of Average Joes, and I think going to put pressure on Ionic and Sino to kind of force some respect out of these Average Joes in terms of these builds.
It does mean that Average Joes have to be a little more cautious around things like Circle of Protection, right? If Ares gets chains on you, all of a sudden those flames, like, it's percentage damage. I see health items and physical prots. That's going to burn you down like never before. But so far, again, they don't seem too worried about Ionic, and they don't seem too stressed about Sino. And like you said, with the builds that they're going, it's in a very similar vein. You don't have to. Sino is set up at this point with this much health, with this much kind of utility. He is built to be the bruiser mage. Like, he is playing setup, and it's going to do a decent amount of damage, but realistically, he's trying to survive in these fights, to continually get multiple spirit balls off, to get multiple shields off and silences off, to make sure that his team is going to be able to kind of have that set up for someone like Pagon or for someone like Stuart to really follow up on with some solid damage.
Sturdy Artisans are just grouping up a bit better. They take this mid-tier 1 down. They force the beads out from Ishtao as well. And Gore, I don't see how Average Joes are keeping it so even as in goes Uzi, and Sino is the target. Waxing Moon finds 2, but somehow Sino is still alive. So in comes Ishtao to rectify, and that puts Sino in a coffin. But no escape brings Ishtao in again. The lack of beads is hurting the Oelicious Relentless one. Gets Baronary as well. But I think Average Joes have realized there are still some low health bars they can capitalize on, but it's just not working. Griff only able to get Pagon before he falls to Stuart, a 3 for 2 in favor of the Artisans.
Up to this point, every single fight, well, it's still kind of like this, almost goes even at this point. Average Joes have been able to keep this one so close because afterwards, someone's been alive to go up for it. I mean, we talked about it. The last grouping in mid, they go for a Gold Fury afterwards, but this is the first time it feels like the Sturdy Artisans have a significant lead after taking a W in a fight, right? They finally get a win, and they get to go over there, get a Pyromancer. Stuart's getting a little bit, but they still lose Sino and Pagon, so that strips away things like the Fire Giant potential that could have been there otherwise. But it's little fights like that, right? Just take it and turn it into a bigger role. You've already got 2 of your towers missing, but you've knocked down 3 in the process, right? It's these little chunks of damage that they're doing to each other's side of the map that is going to make the big roll. And as Sino, Pagon respawn with a Gold Fury coming up relatively soon as well, they can start setting up for either a Fire Giant or a fight on the other side, and know that pretty soon afterward, they're going to be able to get a tier 2 guaranteed to Phoenix at this point. It just depends on this next fight. It's still too close to really count Average Joes out, but if Ishtao, Baronary get caught out as early as they did with beads down, it's going to be an easy fight for Sturdy Artisans.
I think that was the biggest deal in that last fight. They lost Ishtao way too easily on the back of that no escape, but this Fire Giant's down to half. Sturdy Artisans are committing, and they've got the Circle of Protection hard to out-confirm it, and the objective does go to the Artisans, but will they get out with their lives? Pagon is the first casualty of war. In comes Griff, looking to try and take Stuart out of the equation early, but not before. Stuart can get rid of El Leon. Baronary, though, means they get one more. 2 members of Sturdy Artisans have already lost the FG buff, so does Relentless One and Gore. Not worth it just to get that buff onto your E set and your Ares.
Yeah, if I'm looking at it, the 2 people, like, I think it's still going to be helpful for Sino, but not anywhere near as nice as having Pagon and Stuart pick that up. And this is going to be rough for him because they don't even have enough to defend. This should be a tier 2. And honestly, with the timers the way they are, you should pressure the Phoenix as hard as you want and make them force a decision out of them. Either you're going to get a couple of kills here and really stagger them out, or you're going to get a structure and you're going to be able to win this side of the map. It's not necessarily as crucial as it could be over there on the left. There's still a tier 1 tower, but this gives a big swing in favor of Average Joes. Fire Giant being on, again, 2 members, but maybe less important, means you're not worried about your own structures falling. And now that Gold Fury is spawned up, you have a different target that you can isolate. You know what ults are down. You can really play the map.
Look at the charts. That tells the whole story. The Artisans nearly were pulling this game handling in their favor, but losing 3 members in the fight. The tier 2, the Phoenix, brings it right back in the favor of Average Joes. It's just too heavy of a commitment onto that Fire Giant to really make it worth it, and Average Joes punish perfectly. And look at some of the key items that got finished going into that fight, like this Lotus Crown for Baronary, providing those extra protections on the top of those heals, making his team just that much tankier. They got in there perfectly and really punished those Artisans. And now, Gore, we are right outside the Gold Fury. Yet another battle about to start up that Average Joes must win if they want to keep up this momentum.
Sino's got that Circle of Protection, though. Every objective fight becomes infinitely harder if that mage, if Iset is in the game and has her ult. It's just so difficult. Baronary, you could still lock people down, but it might not be enough.
Whoa! Ozzy and Leon have moved in, the cage is down, and they are in the ultimate. Stuart, the early target, but he still looks so healthy. Somehow Ishtao is the one that ends up in trouble, and Stuart does a great job to turn things around, and Griff is followed as well. This fight is done. The damage for Average Joes have been lost, and Sturdy Artisans are on the prowl looking for more.
They can find it. Baronary is going to be an easy target, and you can see Pagon knows exactly where he wants to go. But this tier 2, again, with only 2 people having Fire Giant, do they want to siege this? They have minions right behind them. They actually have a lot of progress to be able to push here. But it's the question of tier 2, Gold Fury. Do you want to try for Phoenix with 3 up? It's a difficult decision to make.
Yeah, they'll take this tier 2 down, and it looks like, or they are going to back up, just strip the farm, probably take this Fury as well. I don't know if I love that engage there from Average Joe's. I know that they were able to blink in, but Ishtow and Griff really seemed to get lost in the shuffle. What went wrong for him in that fight?
I honestly just think it comes down to the fact that, like you said, it was kind of staggered, if anything. Uzi goes in, the cage is down, and then they kind of get lost in the sauce, right? Like, it seemed like they didn't know who they wanted to go on, and that's where I think Leon, from support, this is where your shot calling skills really come into, not even into question. I just think they're the most crucial portion of this. Everyone needs to be on the same page, and you have to be choosing who to go for. And unfortunately, it looked like it was Sino. Sino got down to virtually dead, but not dead. And that, I think, is the key, right? Sino, especially because of that E-Staff, is ripping health bars from people, getting shields off of people using his own kit, and able to kind of peel for himself. It just felt like they didn't have a true idea of where to lock him down. And when you give someone like Set, something like on her, the ability to peel you apart, they're going to demolish you. And unfortunately for Ishtow, like that 3 and 6 slash line really is going to be the story of it, because early on, getting a lot of those kills, being proactive, but so far has been met with kind of a giant red fist in his face. Like, cannot get past that, cannot get towards Sturdy Artisans, and isn't finding the kills. And I think that's just something that needs a playstyle change. Ishtow maybe needs to stop being a first responder here and start playing a little bit around like the ganks, try and go around some walls, get out of the line of sight of Sturdy Artisans, and catch him off guard, because so far he's been read like a book every single fight.
Well, Core, who have we seen Ishtow successfully pull? I can only remember pulling an Eonic a couple of times back towards the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Ishtow is just trying to get it done the old-fashioned way, dashing in with Suku and just trying to do enough damage before he dies, and that's not been working. The Artisans have responded in kind. I thought Stewart was an early target in that fight too, that they started earlier on that left-hand side by Fury, but he came out of it with both relics still up and very healthy. So I'm right there with you. It doesn't seem like there's a clear target focus, and it doesn't seem like they're doing enough small engagements first to kind of burn away at some of the relics and survivability of Artisans before they all in commit. Just got to be a little bit more patient with it, I'm thinking, from Average Joe's. As Pagon has some aggressive positioning behind Average Joe's, but he's on these minions. They know where he's at.
Yeah, this is one of those things, like you said, aggressive positioning, but he's certain he can get out or certain that his team will be there, right? It's that weird flex, but you have fire minions to deal with. That minion, or that Phoenix is respawned, so you can deal with this wave. I think it will be the last one. Yeah, the last one you have to deal with. Once it's gone, you're set, but you have to stay alive during the process.
Well, there's a pluck, and Relentless One has to use the ultimate very, very early. Not bad from Average Joe's this time to kind of move in and enforce out one of those safety uses on the side of Sturdy Artisans. That's exactly what I want. A great pluck brings him in, and then let's see if they can do it again. Can they find some smarter ways? And now they're not going to let Relentless One back. Great aggression from Uzi. In comes Baronary and Leon to try and punish him further, but somehow Relentless One is still alive, even with the jump in. And finally, he ends up falling to Leon. But there's the no escape with chains on everyone, and Leon gets pulled in, but dropping down his griff to provide some much-needed field.
I mean, it's just good damage coming out from him, and great lock on here. He's gonna go down, and they're still alive. Stewart manages to eke out of that one.
Yeah, somehow he does. Stewart makes it back out. Great spirit ball from Sino, but Griff responds with the relic selection. That means the Eggs and Beads keeps him alive, and it's solo traded for solo. I don't know how that fight doesn't go better for Average Joe's, but Artisans have the tools needed to disengage. They wanted to try and get Relentless One, Gore, but I think maybe it was a little bit too much of a heavy commit.
Well, it's a little, it's kind of heavy-handed. So they go heavily onto Relentless One, right? They burn his ult early, they get the cage to lock him down, and here's where the disconnect really happened. The only people I see attacking Relentless One is Uzi and Leon. Baronary and Ishtow are immediately trying to jump onto Sino, or trying to jump onto Pagon, onto Stewart, and they eat their health bars because of that. And you see Relentless One, like you said, last way longer than he should. This is a good re-engagement. I don't know if it's going to be enough. I just feel like Average Joe's aren't isolating targets well enough here. They're too, scatterbrained in the fight and not trying to burn one person down. If Relentless One dies early in that fight, then you're able to all four jump onto the other one. Watch Sturdy Artisans in those fights, because they are doing that. They're sending 2 to 3 people to isolate one target at a time, and they will burn them down, and then they start moving to the next one. They don't just kind of think, oh, well, you've got him locked down, but that guy's the squishy. I want to kill him. Like, they are actually targeting people right now, and that's what feels like is giving Sturdy Artisans such a heavy advantage in these team fights.
Yeah, I mean, if that fight's going to end with just Relentless one dying on the other side, then I just don't see how it doesn't end up being a bit cleaner for Average Joe's. Gore, I'm right there with you. But as he said, they got a little bit split. Their DPS went elsewhere instead of onto that primary target as Leon moves up. Stewart, the target, he's plucked in already. Interrupted using the beads, goes right into Desert Fury, still has the leap. And finally, Uzi ends up using it to reposition, but somehow Stewart finally gets it up, gets out of the cage before it lands, so Griff lands on him in the back of the fight, and that's a critical kill to get rid of Stewart early. Maybe Average Joe's can leverage this, but they lose Griff right on the back of it. He has to commit too hard, and ends up falling. Baroneri right behind, and already Average Joe's have lost the vast majority of their DPS. Uzi will fall next, Ishtal right behind, and a very clean fight from the Artisans as they absolutely handle the Joes.
I mean, they committed so much to kill Stewart there, and they trying to engage the fight in the Fire Giant pit, trying to re-engage the fight, and then finally you get a kill onto Stewart. But like you said, you overcommit. There's so much being dropped into killing the one on her that it doesn't burn through anybody else. And again, this is where that E-Staff, I'm going to keep highlighting it as I keep seeing that health bar for Sino work out. He's getting super low, but never dying because of that extra health that he has on there. It's just so difficult for them to come through. I mean, it's only 200, maybe not a lot that you're going to think, but it's been enough for him. And now with Circle of Protection, yeah, I think this is just done.
And I think so too. Griff will be up in 5, Baroneri will be up in 7, but I agree about Circle Protection. It's just too good. There will be no response as the Titan ends up falling, and Sturdy Artisans get it done with an E-set jungle and a set mid. Set mid not quite as weird, I don't think, as the E-set jungle, but Gore, I think they just were great counter-engagers in this game, weren't they? They would just let Average Joe's overstep, and then they handled it perfectly afterwards.
It's the perfect example of being I guess a gelatin, right? A gelatinous blob in D&D is just going to eat your punches and absorb them. You can't just brute force it. You have to kind of figure things out. And that's kind of what they were. You throw all of your punches at them. They go, okay, cool. Are you done now? And then ate up whatever was left. I mean, you're using relics. You're using all of your ults for engage and things like that. And then at the end of the day, all of the Sturdy Artisans are still standing pretty proudly with most of their health bars and all of their ultimates available. They crack their knuckles, pop their neck, and then just start the beat down afterward.
Well, a great game there for the Artisans, finding that game-win win over a tough Average Joe's team. We'll be breaking it down for you all right after this very quick break.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the post-game breakdown with me and Mifflin here. We're here to talk about all things numbers, analytics, what went wrong, what went well between these two teams, and what a game to break down. There was certainly some interesting things happening throughout this game. Shall we start with the E-set jungle?
I mean, that is one place to start. I mean, that whole draft was just so incredibly strange, wasn't it? But the E-set jungle in particular, I thought was going to get bullied throughout the entirety of that match. And we saw it happening a little bit towards the early. Ishtal getting involved very early on in mid in the 2v2, was able to secure himself first blood. But from there, Sino, despite falling in the early, was able to claw his way back, dealing immense damage, controlling the objectives in space incredibly well. And that's all with and Odin running him down consistently. Uzi made it his sole purpose in life to make sure Sino wasn't able to have a fun game, and it still wasn't enough.
For sure, these cages were basically reserved for Sino and maybe sometimes as well Pagon. And we've got a couple of the clips here. I think this was one of my favorite moments. This fight is where it kind of turned around for me. Artisans come out of that fight with a really big pull from Eonic, and then from there, they kind of turn it around. I think at this point, we were talking about who was gonna come out ahead, and I think we both had different ideas of who was gonna do it, and Artisans just ended up pulling it through.
Yeah, the Artisans look so good, but I think it might have been a little bit of the average Joes flubbing the team fight phase. They would keep getting split up. We would see these 3v3s and these 2v2s. They weren't quite sticking together as a team, and when you're really so focused on diving an individual player, you need to have all 5 of your teammates there. You need to have a full concentrated effort, because 2 people running at Sino are just 2 people dying. 5 people running at Sino, you might be able to take them down.
Yeah, very disjointed for sure. I think on multiple occasions I saw Griff all into that front line, maybe pick up a kill, maybe sometimes not, and then just get turned around onto because he's just so far away from the rest of his team. So I think that's probably the biggest note we can give to Joes at the moment. Just those team fight changes really need to occur for game number 2 here. Are there any things in picks and bans, though, Mifflin, that you think they might want to shake up?
It's so hard to say, right? Am I going to say, oh, yeah, ban the E-set jungle, or you got to be worried about that Ares support? It's so difficult for anything that the average Joes to do to really affect what Sturdy Artisans are running, because they're going for just pocket picks. They didn't touch the meta. They didn't even look at it from a distance. They were playing their own game, and when you have that, when you're able to play your own match, when you're not regarding what everyone else is valuing, it means that, really, you're forcing them to play your match. Sino, locking in the E-set jungle, he could do it again for all I care. It looked that good.
Yeah, I got to agree with you, and that's one of the strongest things about this team. I think Artisan's really comfortable with just playing whatever they want to play. So I have to jump into the picks and ban stage to actually find out what, if anything, is going to change between these two teams. But honestly, Mifflin, you joked about it. I would not be surprised to see the Joes ban away E-set.
I would be surprised, because there's still so much value out there that you have to address. Are you trading your Tiamat ban for an E-set? I don't think so. Are you going to let Guan Yu through so that E-set can't be played? I don't think so. I feel like the average Joes are kind of pigeonholing themselves a little bit by being forced to deal with these unorthodox picks from the Artisans.
That's fair. That's very fair. I think the first bans here from the Artisans kind of tell us a little bit about what they want to do. They don't want that Nemesis. They don't want that Sobek. They don't want Joes to have either of those two. So we'll just take them right away. I'm really interested to see the second half of Joe's bans. The Tiamat for now. So definitely not trading away the Tiamat ban for the E-set. But that third ban is going to be very telling, as Athena is banned away here finally for the Artisans, really wanting to prioritize that. And Morrigan will be the last takeaway here from Joe's.
It will be, and what does that leave on the table? That's Kamazotz that was banned in Game 1. I think we're starting to see why. Immediately picked up by the Artisans. Could go into Sino's hands, could go into Relentless One's hands. I mean, at the rate and the picks that we've seen, we saw Pagon on the set mid last time, might even go Kamazotz mid. It's hard to say when these guys are so willing to be so flexible with their picks, but we can at least address what the Joes are able to pick up in exchange. Gods like Set are still available, still considered some of the best in slot out of jungle. You still have Apollo out there. That global presence is incredibly strong. If Leon decides to flex back in a mid, could go towards that Yanis, but instead, Apollo is going to get locked in. Set as well. I don't think you could ask for a better top 2.
Absolutely not. Really smart identification of what is still available, what they can pick up, and these two are, as you said, to use your own wording, best in slot. I think especially Apollo may be debatable for set, but he's definitely up there. Yamoja, meanwhile, is going to get locked in for the Artisans here, alongside the E-set again. Now, you know, I'm not even going to try and think about where this is going to go. I know better. I know better than to attempt to decipher Artisans team draft. So we're just going to move on and talk about Aphrodite. It's going to be the last pickup here of the first stage of picks and bans for the Joes.
And we know that the Joes likely will be sending this Aphrodite into solo. Uzi's been playing it very consistently, but it's interesting, especially considering how versatile Aphrodite is. If you lock her into that mid role, have it kind of team up with this set, the dive potential really does go through the roof. But we're talking about the SCC, so I got to talk about players and not strategies, and we know Uzi loves this pick, so I think it is a pretty fair bet to say that Aphrodite likely is going to the solo lane, but the Artisans are going to go ahead and hedge their bets and say, Afro's going mid. They're banning out Odin and Kakullen, saying that Uzi likely wants one of those. On the other side, would say ESET's going mid if it were any other team on the planet, but I think we can probably predict that ESET is going to go into the jungle. Camazot's mid potentially for Pagon. It's hard to say.
It really is. Relentless One also really likes this pick. I think it's something that we've touched on before, so honestly, everything's wide open for the Artisans. Cupid doesn't really help us narrow it down. That's very likely going to be going over towards the Hunter. This tier, though, for the Joes, maybe throws a spanner in the works of who this Aphrodite is going to go to. Not quite sure there, but Tsukiyomi is going to get the last pick here for Artisans. Yeah, this still doesn't help. I still don't know what's going on with that draft.
Look, I can say one thing definitively. It's either going to be Camazotz or Tsukiyomi in mid. I'm not even willing to entertain the thought that ESET's going to go into the role that is most commonly associated with her. Meanwhile, on the other side, Tyr is picked up in that solo lane. More than likely for Uzi, could even flex into the jungle if they do decide to saw set in the mid and have Aphrodite out of solo. Both teams going for some very interesting drafts, but I think the identity of the Joes is pretty clear. We're waiting for that late game team fight potential where you can utilize the healing from Aphrodite and have your Cthulhu rock with Descent into Madness be that CC core for your squad while the rest of your team kind of acts as solo agents. Whereas the Artisans, I think it's more of the same. We're looking for early objective control and late game team fight presence inside neutral territory like Fire Giant Pit or around the Gold Fury.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you here. This comp from Artisans just screams early pressure to me. Camazotz, Cupid, Tsukiyomi. 3 characters especially that just have so much damage in that early to mid phase. So we'll have to see if they're going to be able to use it as well as they did in the last game, or if Joes can maybe do a better job at singling out this ESET and making sure that she's not going to be so much of a problem. Real big question mark on this tank trio, the Aphrodite, the Tyr, and the Cthulhu. They still a little bit up in the air as to where these 3 picks can go.
Look, man, it's so hard. I think Leon could potentially, if he's going back into support, might be willing to play the Tyr. I know, having watched his streams and watched his competitive career, that he really does like that god, and I'm not a huge fan of Cthulhu inside of that support role, so we might see him elsewhere.
Potentially, but we're gonna have to find out in-game, Mifflin. Let's go straight to it as the casters break it down.
Thank you, Blazy and Mifflin. Still Finch and Gormizer here as we move into Sturdy Artisans Average Joe's game number 2. Sino still on the ESET jungle. I think I would have bet my life on that, if I'm being honest, after how well Sino played it in game number 1. I mean, you'd have had to tie Sino down to pry this out of his hands. I'm thinking Relentless One takes the Camazotz to solo. Pagon will play another assassin mid. It will be Tsukiyomi this time. We certainly can make that work. And then over on the right, Baroneri playing the Aphrodite mid, and Leon takes the Tyr support. Uzi keeps the Cthulhu over in solo, and Ishtao has set in my favorite place for him, the jungle. Gore, what do you make of all this? Go where you please.
Honestly, I think the thing I'm most excited about is the fact that the Tsukiyomi mid, it's not something that we get to see too often, And so that's a little intriguing, right? Like, set mid happens, and that's something that we've gotten to see from pretty much all levels of play. But Tsukuyomi is a different story, and I'm just excited to see how Pagon pilots this one. I think it's going to be very similar in terms of style, though. Admittedly, maybe a little easier, because Tsukuyomi can fight a little further from range and have a little bit easier time making sure he's not going to have some trouble. I also think, speaking of some trouble, there's going to be a little bit for Relentless one. Maybe a little more focus over there on the solo lane, just because Uzi, Cthulhu's already hard to deal with. Same thing can be said for Camazotz, but I don't think either of them are going to be making a lot of progress over there. Relentless one might actually struggle a little bit more, especially when they start grouping up and having to deal with this Aphrodite healing. All of a sudden, Cthulhu's going to become this unstoppable monster later on. It gives Average Joe's an interesting team fight dynamic, and that's why I like the other thing I see, which is that Tainted Steel in mid. Again, it's small right now. They don't have a lot of anti-heal built into Sturdy Artisans the way that Average Joe's did last game up against some of the healing. And so things like Tainted Steel, Brawlers, your Divine Ruins, all of those are going to be really crucial to see getting built up, because you can see it right there at the bottom. Enemy gods that you have hit have their healing reduced by 20%. It's not a whole lot, 20% compared to some of the other items, but it will be effective early on. So Baronary is going to be an interesting dynamic to see that fight.
Oh, Ishtar drops the beads, but didn't expect Sino to come in and drop the Spirit Ball point blank. Poor Ishtar gonna have to push up daisies as artist and get that first blood and gore. Maybe Sino just keeps playing this pick until people figure out how to deal with it. He's making this look great. Is now Pagon getting aggressive in mid, can't find the stun. Baronary does great work with the kiss, and they end up getting very, very low. I'm becoming a fan very quickly of Sino on this Isis pick.
Well, it's like this interesting thing, right? If you're playing Iset mid, everyone knows how to counter that. You just sit on her. Your jungler comes over, that's a free gank. But she's never in the same spot here. She's going to be farming all around. Theoretically, you can still run around, similar to what Leon's doing right now. Try to catch her out in the jungle, find her, burn her, and build it down. But you have to out-confirm as well and hope that no one's going to rotate. With Tsukuyomi being the one who can rotate as an assassin, being able to move pretty quickly across the map as well, I think it gives them this interesting dynamic, not something I wouldn't be upset to see. Just try it out a little bit more. I'm excited to see what Sino's going to keep giving us this game.
Leon drops the Fearless point blank onto Stewart, and Ishtar here for the cleanup. No, he set around this time, so Ishtar looks much better, and Ionic forced to use the Riptide to escape. It does its job well, and Average Joe's will now settle for those Oracles instead. But yeah, everyone looks better when there's not when Sino's not around, huh? And he's not silencing and stunning. But now Ionic thought you had escaped, did you? Could just come back to 2-0 lane all willy-nilly, where the answer is no. Leon is here for the cleanup, but can he find it? He's taking too much damage from the tower. Trades it back to Griff, who gets the kill, but now Stewart will happily clean up Leon, who gets the heal and maybe even makes it out. But there's the dash. Now Griff, dash in, protect your boy.
That should be
Doesn't do it. Leon is done for. What? Leon makes it out of there. Absolutely nuts.
Close call.
Nope.
I disagree. Look, there's he should have died, and he deserves to pay for it. But I think that's actually crucial. I mean, that's so big for Average Joe's. That's such a deep dive, and it comes into twofold, right? Griff pushes the minions forward. Leon steps out right before he would have taken a tower shot that kills him and is able to run back through that tower because the minions are taking him. He's smart, doesn't try to fight, doesn't try to do anything up against Stewart. And he gets out of there with some good jukes and maybe a little bit of luck. I don't know, that health, let's call it calculated as it comes down to it. And now if you're Sturdy Artisans, again, similar to last game, you're trying to fight back, but much like Average Joe's in the last game, even though maybe the fight didn't necessarily go the way Sturdy Artisans did, the gold's still in their favor. So they've got that going for them.
Yeah, not a bad way for this game to get started. Sino does his work in the jungle with this E-set, has us gassing him, but El Leon elsewhere on the map pulls the attention back where it is deserved, helping to set up the kill for Ishtar, then getting the kill for Griff. My man's showing one of the hardest earned 0-2 score lines I've ever seen, as he somehow narrowly avoids death. Now it's Sturdy Artisans getting aggressive on the Chaos side of the map, just stripping away purple, easy as you like, because there's no one here to defend. And so, not bad work from Sturdy Artisans to take a little bit back.
And they're able to not only confirm that one, they get their own buffs as well. No big sacrifice for it. So at the end of the day, like you said, clean. You come in, you get out. And the biggest thing I think is that Leon giving them the Jake special. This is something we were kind of talking about in between games. Ishtar didn't have a lot of impact in that last game. In fact, died more often than really got to dictate the pace of the game. I want to see the set be different, but also Leon, as much as you can do on Sobek in terms of setup, there's only so much that you're going to be able to get done, right, as a Guardian, and that's kind of what we started the last game with in that conversation. But Tier, and this awesome Jake special, as I like to call it, as a support, it's just different. It's going to hit a little harder early on because he's got the warrior damage. He doesn't have the guardian scaling, so he's going to be a little squishier, so a little easier to kill, but he's going to make up for that in terms of what he can do in terms of capability. I think this is going to help get Ixtal off the ground.
Oh, no. Campo Vilionic went down, beat down Alley again, even drops the Rivers of Buke as a sad sort of tribute to his funeral. Unlucky there for him as he's now become the second death, 2/3 of the kills Average Joes have gotten. Gore, where can my man Ionic go? Because it seems like everywhere he goes is Get Jumped Boulevard, huh? Or some kind of back alley where Average Joes are waiting to send my man to the great beyond.
It is one of those awkward moments, especially as Emoja, like, you don't have the Omi reach in or the Omi count at this point to really get away from a lot of these fights or to heal yourself through it, especially if you don't have anyone nearby. So you just have to be careful.
Well, Leon once again going to walk the tightrope, gets the Undying Love, perfectly timed. Ixtal can't clean up the kill, though, so that means somehow they'll be able to get Sino out of there, but that was very nearly another death for El Leon. How does he do it? And in comes Griff once again, like a superhero, dashing in from stage left, getting yet another kill. El Leon lives, and in comes Relentless One, desperately trying to find one of these kills. He knows it's there. It should be happening. Griff is slowed. But Relentless One and Pagon cannot close the gap, and yet again Average Joes pull off a miracle, and now Uzi is here, so the dive can continue. El Leon comes in just to gift his life away, but no, once again the ultimate gets him back to the tier 1. He's pulling off the acrobatics.
Man, this is a different Average Joes than the last game. I don't know what it was. Like, very similar to last week. Like, last week, their game 1 was phenomenal, and then their games 2 and 3 weren't. This game, game 1 wasn't, and now game 2, it's just a different team that we're getting to see here because they are engaging properly, they're isolating the right targets, they're saving each other. Like, Bayroneri is showcasing why Aphrodite is still a thorn in everybody's side and why no one likes playing against her, because that ult and saving someone that is just a hit away from death is so frustrating to play against here. Sturdy Artisans watching Leon get out of there, what, 3 times I feel like he walked in and got out alive? A couple of those times, thanks to Bayroneri. And then at the end of the day, not only is that going to be a frustration point for them, but it's going to transition. Uzi as well coming in. They don't really have a lot of immediate answers for this Cthulhu. And so if Uzi's making rotations, it's even more difficult, I think, for Sturdy Artisans to really stand up and start taking fights for themselves. If Ionic continues to get beat down, much like it felt like he was about to right there, I mean, you're going to have a support diff all of a sudden coming through, the solo diff coming through, Tainted Steel picked up over there for Uzi as well, just to make sure there's a little bit of anti-heal to stop anything from the Circle of Protection as well as from Ionic to slow them down. It's just going to be a lot of handling from Average Joes. It feels like they've got a lot better approach to what Sturdy Artisans have picked up, and that's just going to make it infinitely more difficult for the Sturdy Artisans to turn things around. That being said, they were behind early last game, so don't go counting them out just yet. They will adapt. It's just whether or not they can do it soon enough.
It's scary to try and, put all your faith in Average Joes. I mean, they're still behind, even being ahead 4-1 in the kills, right? But they keep pulling off these heroics. It's just a question, Gore, of if they can keep doing it time and time again. They might perhaps be getting too close to the fire to not get burned with the way that their playstyle is currently working out. But boy, is it fun to watch Leon, make these narrow escapes to watch the backup he gets from Bayroneri, who has the heals, to watch Griff come flying in to finish off those kills that almost escape. It certainly is fun, but how are they going to have that translate to the late game is my question. You brought up Uzi and how difficult it'll be for the Artisans to deal with him. Does he have to be the centerpiece, him and Ixtal, with Bayroneri keeping them alive? Whatever their strategy is, I want Average Joes to really lock it down this game, because that was their issue in Game 1, was it seemed as though they were on different pages of 2 different books in those late-game team fights. I want to see them coordinated, even if it doesn't pan out.
Yeah, that's, I think, the biggest thing. Keep up this kind of pace, even if you are falling behind. I mean, find an isolated kill on Ionic would be pretty solid, even though we've already done it a few times. And it looks like that's exactly what Griff wants to do.
Griff going to make sure
What
Ionic
a bait!
Can't get away, but great work from Ionic to juke out to that ultimate, and it means Ionic gets to keep his life. Unlucky for Griff, or rather just outplayed by Ionic, who's seen the afterlife too many times to go back he knows what awaits him. As now there's a dive from Ishtao, or rather a dive from Pagon on to Ishtao underneath the mid-tier 2 with Sino there to back him up. But can ESET pull off the tower dive? The answer is so clearly yes that I'm sorry I asked. Sino does a great job cleaning up the kill on Ishtao.
And this is actually what's really interesting to me. Sino, and specifically ESET, for a while there was regarded as like one of the best early game mid laners, right? Like just being able to hold her own early on in mid, didn't transition as well on her own to the late game, did great team fight presence in the late game. So right now, Leon, are you going to keep this chase up? It looks like they want to continue fighting. Luckily, they're going to pause so I can keep on this point. Sino is showcasing last game and this game so far that as the game goes on, he's becoming more of a threat. I mean, I think he's kind of changing, again, the dynamic that at least my mind goes to when I see ESET, and that is that, yeah, you know what, early on, he's just going to sit back and farm. We're not going to be gank heavy if it's in the jungle. It's not going to necessarily be there every time you need a jungler. It's going to have to take a little bit, but once it gets online, it's going to be a lot of damage. He's going once again for that Stone of Binding here as his third item, Spear of Deso there in the very first one. Same build, so expect E-Staff after this, then Rada Tahuti after that, because it worked so well. I mean, he was 7, 2, and 10. If Sino can keep up that amount of presence, the cooldown that he's going to have, just kind of in, I guess, the low cooldown that is Circle of Protection. It was up for what felt like damn near every fight they needed it to last game. I expect him to just have such a high level of presence from this ESET that it will make everyone else kind of inherently look better.
So that's the Greater Scorpion down right around the 12-minute mark here in this game. Means we'll be having the Fury before too long in response, and hopefully that will incite these teams to battle over it. But we've seen them be willing to fight just in general. I don't know if they need a reason so much as when they see the opportunity, they will take it. We saw Sino pull off the Blink Tower dive moments ago. Looks like Relentless One was considering this Greater Scorpion. No, he's just looking for pathing to get around, but he steps over a ward either way. So as he knows exactly where he is, Relentless One can't make it from there. And we might not be seeing too much action until this Fury becomes the focal point for these two teams again here, Gormizer. And once they do, how do you see that fight going? I mean, I feel like you gotta favor the team with a Circle of Protection, right? Sturdy Artisans have played around this ESET ultimate perfectly so far in Game 1 and again here in Game 2. I don't see any reason why they can't group up there again and then dare average shows to try to out-confirm them on the objective.
If they do fight, as long as they fight before Leon hits 12, I think that's going to be pretty solidly in favor of Sturdy Artisans. Once it's around the Gold Fury as well, like, it's that talk of, okay, are you going for objective or for kills? Objective, it's Sino, like, Sturdy Artisans 100% of the way. Like you said, Circle of Protection is just too much to handle in that case. And Bayronary is not one of the few mages, I think, that has an ult that can really contend with that. Things like Spirit of the Nine Winds from a Kukulkan, things like that, that really have the extra burst that you, if timed properly, can outpace a Circle of Protection. But what they do have is a lot of healing and a Cthulhu, which means if it's a fight for kills, average Joes are going to be able to maybe come in and clean things up. I don't think that Sino and that healing from Circle of Protection is going to be the big point. It'll be, the, again, like last game, that big burst of damage. Leon went for a, I believe it was, yeah, the Cursed Ankh second relic in game number 1. And so if he goes for a Cursed Ankh again, just to deal with the healing coming down from Sino, but also Ionic, then it's going to make it a little easier to deal with these team fights.
Pagon leads down. Circle of Protection has been used, and the River's Rebuke will split the team fight. But Leon once again looking to escape, but Heart Bomb on him, as well as Pagon, and Pagon hits the fade-away shot. Perfect buzzer beater from him to put Leon in the dirt. And so now Sturdy Artisans come right back to the Fury, but they don't have ESET here. Sino is alone in mid. What happened? Sturdy Artisans had the position. They went to the Fury, and then after they win the fight, they suddenly get fragmented.
Yeah, there was definitely some disconnect there. 4 members go left, ESET goes right, and then all of a sudden things fall apart. Like, it's maybe tower pressure, maybe jungle invades, but that should have been a pretty decently free Gold Fury. Maybe they were worried about the capabilities of average Joes to be able to walk in. There was still maybe some good steal potential to come through, but Sino had Circle of Protection up, and we saw him use it right before he died, so we know he could have confirmed it. That's bad. There's just that one was just not good. Whatever they did, whatever happened to lead to that result was not clean from them. So Sturdy Artisans are going to have to pick that up. Just because you won a couple of kills doesn't mean you've won the fight. And so they need to be a little more careful, especially with Griff playing the way he has. 2-0-3 right now. These rotations have been on point. Even last game, I think Griff was definitely a big thorn in their side. So you have to be a little more aware of what this Apollo is willing to do. because otherwise he's going to be able to do exactly that over and over and over again. He's going to find you right at the tail of the fight, and he's going to take you down.
Sturdy Artisans, though, still has some meaningful leads, Core. I want to see them keep that pressure going. They're ahead in solo, ahead in mid, ahead in support. A little behind Griff, who you already covered, was a big problem for Artisans last game, and got to make sure they're dealing with here in this game. I think they might even have a slight lead in jungle. We'll see once a little bit more farm goes their way and if that evens out. But either way, Artisans are out in front. But it's Average Joes that are at the Fury this time, and they'd love to start it up before Circle of Protection has time to get down and become uncontestable in terms of secure. So Griff's on it for now. Baronary has the heal on Leon, and in comes Sturdy Artisans in position for the defense. But Relentless One has two members busy off to the side. Leon has dropped it. They're off the objective entirely, and there is the Circle of Protection. There's the River's Rebuke. There is the Fields of Love. It's all been dropped, and Stewart grabs the very first kill of the engagement. Baronary already removed. ESET ultimate still in the back pocket, not used yet, but do they even need it as Stewart continues to chew through the team fight? It's a double for him and Uzi, likely to be next. Pagon not giving his man the triple, but can you complain when it's a 3 for 0?
Yeah, I'm going to have to stand corrected. I didn't think they were going to have an easy answer to Uzi, but it seems like they do. I think that Stone of Binding, honestly, like, there's a lot of little intricacies. I think the pin that's coming down from Pagon right now is going to be helpful, but anything that is a protection shred, especially this early on, you don't have as many protections here for Uzi. Still enough to make him tanky, but not enough to make him undying. So that's nice to have that little bit of peel that's going to help and assist continue burn things down. This time they do get that Gold Fury afterward, and everything feels just better all around for everyone involved. I think this is so, again, just clean from Sturdy Artisans. That last fight, that last disengage, ignored everything else in this game. They've been doing really well, and they've cultivated a 6K gold lead, Finch. I mean, they're up so much in terms of gold for it to be just one kill that is technically in their favor. So much experience, as you had highlighted earlier, pretty much a lead everywhere across the board. I think it was like mainly the jungle that was having some trouble. Like Sino is just slightly ahead of Ishtao instead of 2 levels ahead like some of his others. But I mean, look at the mid diff. Baronary's level 13, just turned 14. I mean, Aphrodite is not having the performance that we're used to seeing out of her. And Sturdy Artisans, just the way their team fight works is just so clean compared to what we're getting out of Average Joes.
Yeah, especially when Average Joes overcommits. Looks like they'll take the Greater Scorpion. A lot of good it'll do them. I imagine the Fire Giant that comes afterwards won't be in their favor. But in that last team fight, which I'm calling Circle of Protection, was really the River's Rebuke and Fields of Love combo that started that fight off so well, Gore, where they got that sort of double kill right at the beginning from Stewart to really get 2 members low right at the start. And then once it was that 5v3, Average Joes were just on the back foot. Average Joes have got to be way more careful about how they're letting these fights start off, because if they're going to get caught inside the Emoja ult and Cupid ult back-to-back, then they're not ever going to win these team fights. It's too much damage and it's too much lockdown. But they tried to be the ones to start up that Fury fight, and Sturdy Artisans just said, okay, we'll take that one from you. And now Sino and Relentless One just brute forcing this right side tier 1. Even with Uzi right there point blank, he knows he can't fight with the rotation incoming. And it just belongs to the Artisans, and now they want the full collapse to 5v1, and Uzi doesn't seem to know yet. He's had to go into the ultimate right away, and that might not even be enough for the River's Rebuke. And Uzi gets melted.
Look, I think when it comes to big ults like these, I like to talk about area of denial, and it's just where you're not allowed to be. And right now, that's what they're doing, right? And even now, Relentless One, that's 3 people. They take him to half health, and he still wants to fight. His team is pushing for a Phoenix right now, and that's how confident he is. Ishtao maybe wasting time chasing this. It actually might be worse for you, because this might go the way of Relentless One.
Okay, well, at least Ishtao won it. That means at least the dignity remains, even though the Phoenix does not. Sturdy Artisans take it on the right-hand side. And it looks like they want the fight, too. Baronary in danger of falling. The relics won't keep him alive. They both are expended, and his life falls right behind. But now they're re-engaged from Average Joe's core as they look to push in.
Man, I really want to go back and watch what happened to Baronary. I mean, to be level 14, 19 minutes in as a mid laner, you're drastically under-leveled. And for an Aphrodite, like that, you're practically useless right now. I mean, you burn your relics, you die anyway, your ult's used. It just showcases here that Average Joe's, whatever was going on in the farm game there in the middle, really started to fall apart. Team fights clean from the Sturdy Artisans, just a few in a row. And all of a sudden, like you said, they're dictating the show. They get a Pyromancer, thanks kind of courtesy of Average Joe's taking care of that Scorpion for him a little bit earlier. And they have Circle of Protection coming up relatively soon, just maybe another minute or so out on that one. So guess what? That means they're going to be able to get a Fire Giant when they want it. If you get good Rivers of Abuse, good Fields of Love the way they have around Uzi, it's just going to be easy kills.
And Ishtal falls again. In comes Griff to try and turn the tide. He at least put Stewart in a box, but Griff now low and forced to overcommit on the back of that Apollo ultimate, but Sino can't get to him. Even using the Wind Gust, it does get him a double kill, and still somehow Uzi hasn't finished him off, but finally he gets the job done. But Leon, stuck in the back, falling to Pagon's presence, and ends up being a 3 for 2. But if you're average Joe's, I mean, even trading 3 for 2 seems like a gift at this point in the game when you're so far behind. They've just got to hope those numbers don't get any worse for them, as Ionic can't quite lock down Uzi, but boy was that close.
Yeah, you really want to keep it 3 for 2. If Baron Area at this point gets caught out, he's dead. I mean, you're 4 levels behind pretty much everybody. You're behind their support, and that is going to showcase that you are absolutely going to be demolished. But I do like that Uzi, unfortunate as it is that you still lose 3 teammates, feels like he isolated a problem unique to him, which is that he knows if Stewart here is not alive, he gets to live a little longer in these team fights. That chin size oboe combo, just being able to chunk through that massive health bar that Uzi's going to have, makes it so much easier for someone like Stewart to burn him down versus what we're seeing it. With the prot shred that you're getting from some of the other places, specifically here from Sino, it's very helpful and makes it a lot easier for Stewart, but Stewart is really the dynamic that shifts these fights, specifically when it comes to the Cthulhu. So if you kill him off early, it will make things easier for Uzi. The problem is that doesn't seem to be an umbrella. Sometimes it is your solo laner staying alive, especially as a Cthulhu, kind of covers everybody else.
Yeah.
But if you're losing Ishtal, Leon, and Griff every time just to keep Uzi alive, maybe not a worthwhile trade.
Leon will contest the Oni Fury, but a great Fields of Love completely shuts him down. Good luck using Fearless now, but the Joes do strip the Fury away, so that is one thing in their favor. What about the fight on the backside with Leon this low with the Rivers of Rebuke, isolating Uzi and not letting him push forward? But might not be much fight on the backside of this at all, so if average Joes get out unscathed, Gore, then they've just stolen an objective, but unscathed was me having wishful thinking. Uzi will be the first casualty of war, and Relentless One will continue the onslaught as Griff barely escapes on the Chariot.
I mean, it's the disengage, right? It's the same thing that was happening last game, where it's Sturdy Artisans reading how average Joes are kind of breaking apart when they're falling back from a fight that up to that point seemed victorious, and then picking them apart like there's just little scraps of meat left on the bone. They figure out where it is, and they pull it down. That was Uzi in that instance. Now it's a 4v5. Griff is over on the other side of the world right now. You're going to lose this Phoenix, and maybe what to save, right? But at this point, even still, it's a lot of pressure. There's still 4 towers standing. You've lost 2 Phoenixes at this point. Average Joes are going to need a lot more than a stolen Gold Fury to turn this around.
Yeah, I don't know how you turn Stolen Gold Fury into you lose your Phoenix, but somehow that's the transaction that just occurred. Losing Uzi on the back of it certainly hurt, and Griff left the fight entirely. He tried to defend that Phoenix in solo side, pushed out the wave, and it is still standing, but basically means he defended one to lose another, and the one on left they lost was still brand new and shiny. Now instead it'll be replaced with a facsimile, a copy, a weaker clone when it comes back, that the Artisans can push right on through. This has been a really clean set from them, and it's been them playing their own playstyle, this all-team fight, all-blow-up potential strategy that's really causing problems for the Joes. They don't have an answer.
And look, you know, there's a lot of things to highlight here. I think everyone has had a big role in it, and you can't understate how big Relentless One, Ionic, Stewart are, but like Pagon's 3-0 and 9, and Sino, like, they just don't have an answer for this E-set, period, let alone coming out of the jungle.
Well, this fight might just decide the game. In goes Leon, and he's already low. Uzi right behind. Jeez. And Leon is a distant memory. Baroneri does use Undying Glove, but he will not live afterwards. Uzi falls too, and who needs Fire Giant? This game might just end right then and now, not with a whimper, but with a bang in favor of the Artisans. As Griff falls, it's a triple for Relentless One, and this game is done. Sturdy Artisans find themselves a 2-0.
I mean, just clean play from them. 7-3 and 6 as opposed to the 7-2 and 10. Oh no, Sino, you've fallen off so hard from game 1 to game 2, right? I mean, it's just so good as a team composition, the way things are working. They don't have any minions with them. I guess they're trying to figure out how they want to get in there. Yeah, heal up a little bit. That Titan, it's still exposed. They're going to take a little bit, but with Pagon at 4-0 and 12, like, you can really see that this mage jungle, again, what Sino likes to do, play things that are a little estranged in the jungle, but make it work because they can have a flexible mid laner. It makes me a little more excited to continue watching the Sturdy Artisans team as time goes on.
Well, I appreciate the Artisans at least making it a bit close, but Circle of Protection all but guarantees it. They'll get a few kills at the end there as well, Gore, but you are right. They're unique strategies. Picking up things that are not common, that the other teams aren't used to, has thrown Average Joe's for a loop. I'm not sure what the case is with Dingodile, why he's not here, why Leon has moved over to support Gore, but if they were just trying something different, then maybe go back to the old stuff because it just did not look good right there in that game. And if you are on the other side Artisans, then keep, marching to the beat of your own drummer because boy is that working.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the time, normally, you get to talk about, like, team fights. That's something that a lot of people, like, if you play Arena, you get into team fights a lot. Assault, you get into team fights a lot. Like, arguably, that's the easiest, quote-unquote, practice to get in Smite. But it gets different when you translate it to Conquest. And I feel like that's where Average Joe's right now. Like, there were some farm issues in that second game, but realistically, it was the team fights late game that really just started falling completely apart. They didn't know how to handle it. Maybe that Sturdy Artisans playing it way too well, especially with the counter engage. Maybe they need some work on it. But either way, I think they definitely have some improvements for next week.
We'll get to see all those improvements hopefully next time they play. We'll have the desk break all this down for you right after this short break.
Welcome back, ladies and gents. Game number 2 ends once again with Average Joe's facing their defeat 2-0 with the scores of the doors at the end of that one. Mifflin, what happened there?
Look, the Average Joes need to work on the macro game. They need to work on what they do after a team fight win, what they do after they find these picks, because there were points in the match where it felt like they should have had the lead. They should have been able to win out. They would take small skirmish Ws and turn it into nothing. And the Sturdy Artisans, despite being behind in KD throughout the early, win one team fight, pick up a gold free. Win another team fight, Fire Giant. And from there, it just felt like everything just kind of slipped out of control for the Joes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It was just not as clean as we would like to see from this Chaos side roster. They just didn't really have the ability to transform those wins into the bigger wins. Meanwhile, the sturdy Artisans really were able to translate that. We'll see a bunch of clips from them here at the moment. Pagon really showed off his stuff. I like this little flick here from him, max range there on the moonlit shuriken.
Yeah, I mean, even when in these clips we saw it there, 4-1 was the slash line in favor of Average Joe's. We were still looking at a 2,000 gold lead in favor of the Sturdy Artisans. I think really it does come down to just what you're doing after the fights. That's the only things they need to concern themselves with, because the Average Joes were winning engagements. They were winning consistently throughout the early game in this set in its entirety, but this unorthodox draft from the Artisans just felt like it had too much control around these neutral objectives. The second these teams lined up against each other in a true 5-on-5 engagement, be it around Goldfree, inside a tower, or at the Fire Giant, it was just dictated by the Sturdy Artisans wholeheartedly.
It's almost this shock value, right? Everyone in this level of play knows how to play against a Tsukiyomi roaming around coming to gank, but how many players at SCC, how many teams at this level have the practice and ability to go up against an ESET in the jungle and know what to do, you know? Like, you might know exactly what ESET can do to you, but how's she going to play that in the jungle? What kind of things is she going to pull out? What's their strategy going to be? Where is she going to be? And Sino really showed how effective a shock pick can be in situations like this, coming out, I believe, close to top damage in the first game, and third on the damage chart for his team here. Fourth, sorry, my mistake. Definitely having a big impact and really setting up for those objectives as well.
Yeah, but it wasn't only Sino finding pressure on the map. Pagon topping the damage charts on that Tsukiyomi out of mid, not only controlling his lane, but acting as a secondary jungler. If ESET's over in Soul Lane trying to put pressure there, you better believe Pagon's looking at the duo lane. If he's not there, he's looking for a jungle buff invade or something along those lines. It just felt like, even though it took the Sturdy Artisans a couple of minutes to find their footing, I think it was about 8 minutes into the game where they really started to swing it back in their favor, by that time, they were controlling separate parts of the map individually with one or two of their pieces. Never did they really feel like, throughout the first 15 minutes of that match, did they need to group up as five, because they were taking these fights so well inside the enemy jungle.
Well, let's go ahead and have a look at the standings and how this game affects them so far. Sturdy Artisans walk away with the first 2-0 slash line of the season. Next team to play will be Fishies versus Winner Dogs. So we'll have to see which one of those two is going to move up on the standings. Winner Dogs looking for their first win. So maybe they'll be able to find that up against the Fishies, Mifflin. And then after that, we'll see the probably, for my money, the most interesting matchup of the weekend. The Sharks versus the Herculean Hooves having this Titanic roster. Meanwhile, the Sharks, not really as much name recognition, but definitely showing their worth last week.
Yeah, maybe not as much recognition, but they make up for it in hunger. The Sharks are a team that I think really want to prove themselves out on the field. You can see how they play. They're playing their own individualistic picks as well. But look, man, if you're going to talk about the Sharks matchup, I got to talk about the other squads. This Winner Dogs versus Fishies, I think, should be the closest set of the day, and I'm super excited to watch it.
Me too, but we'll have to wait a little bit longer before we get there, Mifflin. We're going to have to throw it over to a quick break. But until we get back, ladies and gentlemen, make sure to stay right where you are, because we got so much exciting games coming.